The rain tapped steadily against the tall windows of the Harrow Estate, casting long shadows across the marble floor of the east wing. The room had been closed for years, untouched by time, until Alaric Voss ordered its reopening. He stood in silence, dressed in a sharp black suit, staring at the newly revealed portrait hanging over the fireplace. A blond boy with piercing blue eyes stared back at him, unmoving, flanked by a striking German shepherd. The boy wore a navy sweater, his expression unreadable. The dog, almost regal in posture, sat at his side with quiet loyalty. Something about the image unsettled Alaric, something too familiar. Behind him, Lavinia Crest entered quietly with a cleaning bucket in hand. The scent of wood polish followed her as she moved with practiced precision. She had only been working at the estate for 3 weeks, a job taken in quiet desperation. But when her eyes landed on the portrait, her breath caught. The bucket slipped from her hand, crashing to the floor, water spreading like a halo of memory across the rug. Her gloved hand trembled as she pointed toward the frame. "Sir," she whispered, voice cracking. "That boy and that dog, they lived with me at the Rosehill Orphanage." Alaric turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" She nodded, pale as parchment. "It was over 20 years ago. His name was Thorne Voss. The dog's name was Oberon. They were inseparable. One night they vanished. No goodbye, no trace. We searched, but the Reverend said it was a family matter, and we were told never to ask again." The name struck Alaric like a cold gust of wind. Thorne Voss, a name buried in silence. A brother whose memory had been sealed behind layers of grief and secrecy. "They told me he died," Alaric murmured, stepping closer to the portrait. "I was 9. My mother, Isolde, never spoke of it again. I was sent away the next week." Lavinia's voice dropped to a whisper. "He didn't die, Mr. Voss. I remember that night. There was crying, screaming, and then silence. But no body, no explanation. Just then, the door creaked open behind them. A butler stepped in, face pale. "Sir, another delivery just arrived. Another portrait. This one dated 1996. And there's a letter, addressed to you." Alaric didn't move. His gaze stayed locked on Thorne's eyes, and for the first time in decades, he wondered if his brother had ever truly left this house. Alaric Voss stood frozen, the letter in his hands trembling ever so slightly. It had arrived in a plain, weathered envelope with no return address. Just his name written in spidery ink across the front, a Voss. Lavinia Crest hovered near the doorway, unsure if she should leave or stay. Her instincts told her that whatever was inside that letter wasn't meant to remain hidden any longer. The air in the room had shifted, as if the house itself was bracing for the truth. He opened it with slow precision, unfolding the yellowed paper inside. The handwriting was elegant but urgent. "If you're reading this, Alaric, then someone has finally uncovered the portrait. Thorne is not gone. He was taken, and what happened at Rosehill was never what it seemed. Do not trust Reverend Graveheart. Do not trust the estate. It was unsigned. No date, no explanation, only that chilling directive." Lavinia watched his eyes scan the letter, her own heart thudding against her ribs. She had spent years trying to forget Rosehill. The cracked walls, the stale bread, the late-night whispers. But she never forgot Thorne, the quiet boy who barely spoke, but whose eyes always seemed to see through people. She never forgot Oberon either, the dog who growled at the Reverend every time he passed. And she certainly never forgot the night Thorne vanished, nor the smell of smoke in the air the next morning, when the west wing of the orphanage mysteriously caught fire. "You said you were there," Alaric said suddenly, folding the letter. His voice was colder now, more deliberate. "Tell me exactly what you remember." Lavinia hesitated. She had buried these memories so deep they'd become part of her bones. "The Reverend ran Rosehill like a prison," she began. "And Miss Wren, the director, was worse. There were locked rooms, whispered threats, children who came and went too quietly. But Thorne, he was different. I think they feared him. I think they feared what he knew." Alaric turned toward the second portrait, still covered by a linen cloth. He hesitated, then pulled it down. His breath caught. It was Thorne again, older, maybe 10 or 11, but with the same piercing eyes. He was sitting on the front steps of Rosehill Orphanage, Oberon beside him, looking directly at the painter. But the most disturbing detail wasn't the boy's face. It was what stood in the background. Reverend Silas Graveheart, shadowed and smiling faintly, watching the child from behind the window. "They told me Thorne died of pneumonia," Alaric whispered, more to himself than to her. "But none of this feels like death. Feels like erasure." Lavinia stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You need to find the old records, before they disappear, before someone makes sure you stop asking." And as they both stood before the portrait, something behind the walls creaked. A slow, heavy sound, like footsteps where no one should be. The next morning arrived shrouded in a thick fog that clung to the estate like a shroud. Alaric Voss hadn't slept. He spent the night pacing the hallways of Harrow Estate, replaying every fragmented memory of his brother, his mother, and the final week before Thorne vanished. In the dim morning light, he descended into the West Wing, sealed for years after a fire had gutted part of the archive room. With a flashlight in one hand and a ring of old iron keys in the other, he unlocked the creaking door to the records chamber. The air inside was stale, damp with mold, and filled with the scent of smoke that still lingered in the scorched wood. Boxes of unsorted documents were stacked floor to ceiling, some half-burned, others untouched. It was there, buried beneath a collapsed shelf, that Alaric found a leather-bound ledger. On its spine, in faded gold leaf, was the name, Reverend S. Graveheart. He brought it upstairs and spread it open across the dining table, careful not to damage the fragile pages. Lavinia Crest arrived shortly after, still shaken, but determined. Together, they combed through its contents. Rows of children's names, arrival dates, codes scribbled beside each one. Some names were crossed out in red ink. Others simply vanished mid-entry. Then, halfway through the book, Lavinia gasped. Her gloved finger pointed to a line. Thorne Voss admittance. March 5, 1993. Status. Observation Class Omega. No departure date. No note of adoption. Just a stamped symbol Alaric didn't recognize. An open eye within a triangle. "What does that mean?" he asked, tracing the strange mark. Lavinia's voice was low. "I remember whispers. Class Omega was something secret. Special cases. Children the Reverend personally oversaw. They weren't allowed in group sessions. They weren't allowed visitors. They were watched." As they turned more pages, the entries grew darker. Notations in the margins, uncooperative, subject resistant, sedation administered, appeared beside names. Thorne's name came up 3 more times, each more ominous than the last. In one entry dated just days before his disappearance, Reverend Graveheart wrote, "Subject is becoming aware. Separation may be necessary." Alaric's hands curled into fists. "They did something to him," he muttered. "This wasn't pneumonia. This was erasure." Before Lavinia could respond, the lights in the room flickered, and a deep hum vibrated through the floorboards. The chandelier above them swayed slightly, though there was no wind. And then, 3 soft knocks echoed from the main entrance. Alaric stood, heart pounding. "No one should be here." Lavinia didn't answer. She was staring past him, toward the hallway mirror. Her reflection was still, but behind her, something else had moved. Alaric approached the front door slowly, each footstep echoing across the marble floor like a countdown. The 3 knocks still rang in his mind, measured, deliberate, as if whoever stood outside knew exactly what they were interrupting. Lavinia followed at a cautious distance, eyes darting nervously between the mirror and the hallway. When Alaric opened the door, the cold fog rushed in, curling around their legs like smoke. A tall man stood on the stone porch, dressed in a long brown coat and a worn fedora. His eyes were sharp, watchful. In his hand, he held a leather satchel. "Mr. Voss?" the man asked, voice rough with age but clear. "Name's Elias Crow. I was the detective on your brother's case. I know I'm not expected, But when I heard a second portrait was delivered, I knew it was time. Alaric stepped aside, his skepticism flaring. That case was closed 25 years ago. Crow walked in slowly, removing his hat. It was buried. There's a difference. He glanced toward Lavinia and gave a brief nod. And you were one of the girls at Rosehill. I remember your face. You used to sneak food to the others after curfew. Lavinia's eyes widened. You tried to speak to us. But then Reverend Graveheart made you disappear. Crow smiled bitterly. He didn't have to. I was pulled off the case by people with more influence than a reverend should have had. My report was rewritten. My access revoked. But I never stopped digging. He opened the satchel and pulled out a file, thick with old papers, photographs, and handwritten notes. Your brother wasn't the only child marked Omega, Mr. Voss. And he wasn't the only one who vanished. Alaric flipped through the contents. Photos of children's profiles, redacted pages, a map of Rosehill with certain rooms circled in ink. One name caught his attention. Lysandra H. Observation ceased. Removed from records. No further data. Another read. Subject 8B. Failed integration. Reassigned to site. Lavinia turned pale. These weren't orphans. They were test subjects. Crow nodded. Graveheart was working with a private foundation. Experimental psychology, sensory isolation, manipulation of memory. Children with certain traits were labeled Omega. The rest of the staff knew pieces, but no one knew the whole picture. Except maybe Euphemia Wren. And she died under suspicious circumstances just weeks after Thorne disappeared. A loud creak echoed through the hallway, this time from upstairs. All three turned toward the staircase. No one else was supposed to be in the house. Alaric whispered, "We locked that floor." They listened. A slow, deliberate step moved across the boards above them. Then another. And then a low growl. The sound of footsteps overhead was steady. Not hurried, not frantic. Just slow, deliberate, and deeply wrong. Alaric, Elias Crow, and Lavinia stood frozen at the base of the staircase, staring up into the dim corridor beyond the landing. The air had shifted. It felt colder, heavier, like something ancient had stirred from sleep. The growl that followed wasn't mechanical. It was guttural, low, animal, but controlled. Not rage, not fear, something else. "I locked that floor myself this morning," Alaric said, jaw clenched. "No staff, no visitors. No one's supposed to be up there." Crow drew a small revolver from inside his coat and checked the chamber. Locked doors didn't stop what happened at Rosehill. It won't stop this either. He started up the stairs cautiously, every creak beneath his feet like a signal in the dark. Alaric followed close behind. Lavinia hesitated, gripping the staircase rail with both hands as if anchoring herself to reality. As they reached the landing, they noticed the guest room door, Thorne's old room, was ajar. Just slightly, enough to see that the light inside flickered. Alaric felt his stomach twist. That room had been untouched since their mother's death. He hadn't stepped inside in over 20 years. "Stay behind me," Crow whispered, pushing the door open with his foot. The room was exactly as it had been left. A dusty twin bed with iron posts. Toys from the early 90s scattered across the rug. A single lamp blinked weakly in the corner. And there, in the center of the bed, lay a child's sweater. Navy blue, folded perfectly. Next to it, a dog collar. The tag read, Oberon. Lavinia gasped from behind them. That's the same sweater he wore in the portrait. The same collar. She stepped into the room as if drawn by invisible threads. These didn't burn. These waited. Alaric turned in a slow circle, scanning the walls. Then his eyes landed on something just above the bed. A set of childlike handprints, faint but smeared, as if someone had tried to push through the wallpaper itself. Below them, in tiny letters scratched into the paint, were the words, "I remember." Before anyone could speak, the door behind them slammed shut with a violent bang. The lamp flickered twice and then went out, and in the darkness, the growl returned. This time it was closer. The darkness inside the room was suffocating. No one moved. Even the air seemed to pause. Then, a soft scratching began, like claws dragging across wood. Lavinia's breath caught in her throat. Elias raised his revolver and pointed it toward the sound. Though in the pitch black, it was useless. Alaric reached for his phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The beam flickered to life and cut through the shadows, landing on the far corner of the room. There was nothing there. And then a whisper, so faint it was almost missed. Oberon, a child's voice, thin, strained, as if it had traveled a great distance through time or memory. Lavinia's knees gave way, and she fell to the floor, hands shaking. Her mind was spinning. That voice, she had heard it before, decades ago, whispered behind closed doors, cried into pillows at night. It was Thorne's. The door finally creaked open on its own. No wind, no draft, just an unseen force releasing them. Alaric, pale and breathless, helped Lavinia to her feet while Elias moved cautiously into the hallway. The tension didn't lift. It shifted. Now it felt like something was watching them. Not hostile, but deliberate, as if it were waiting for them to put the pieces together. Back downstairs, the silence of the estate was absolute. Elias spread out the remaining documents from his satchel across the library table. Among them, a faded photograph caught Alaric's eye. It showed a group of children at Rosehill, lined up for a yearly inspection. Thorne stood in the middle, holding Oberon's leash. But behind him, partially obscured, was Reverend Silas Graveheart, and a man Alaric had never seen before. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing. Elias squinted. "That's Dr. Albin Morrow, psychologist. He visited Rosehill quarterly, funded by a private research foundation, Orphic Institute. That's where it all leads." Lavinia's voice was quiet but steady. "The Orphic Institute, I remember the name. They came once a year and ran tests. They told us it was normal. But the Omega kids, they never came back from those sessions the same." Alaric clenched his fists. And Thorne was the youngest Omega. He looked again at the picture, at the boy's eyes. He wasn't broken. He was resisting. Then another sound, this time from the drawing room. A soft click, as if someone had just wound up a music box. They moved toward the sound together. On the small table by the window, a music box Alaric had never seen before was playing a slow, haunting lullaby. And etched into the inside of the lid, in unmistakable childlike handwriting, were the words, "Don't forget me." The lullaby faded into silence, but its eerie melody clung to the walls of the room like a presence. Alaric stared at the music box, unmoving. The handwriting etched into the lid was not random. It was Thorne's. He recognized the crooked E's, the open D's. He had seen them on old birthday cards, on crayon drawings now boxed in the attic. This wasn't a message from the past. It was a cry from something still lingering, something waiting. Lavinia stepped back from the table, her face pale. "He's reaching out to you," she said softly. "He remembers. And now he wants you to remember, too." She turned to Elias, who was now digging through a set of floor plans of the estate, unrolled across the dining table. "If he left that here, then he's been here. Recently." Elias nodded. "There's something missing." He tapped a section of the blueprint. This wing used to connect directly to the servant quarters, but the plans were altered. "See here." He traced a faint line with his finger. A wall was added, sealed, hidden. There's a space behind it, a forgotten room. Without speaking, Alaric walked to the far end of the corridor. The wall in question looked solid, but something about the wallpaper felt off. Faint outline, barely noticeable. His hand brushed against it until he found a thin vertical seam, a latch disguised as molding. With a soft click, a panel loosened. Dust poured out as the wall groaned open to reveal a narrow passage. The air was ice-cold and stale, filled with the scent of mildew and something fainter, something metallic. Blood? Rust? The three stepped inside, the flashlight beam cutting through the pitch dark. The passage led to a small chamber, no larger than a child's bedroom. Inside, the walls were covered with drawings. Crude, desperate sketches. Some of children crying. Some of dark figures with hollow eyes. In the center of the room sat a torn mattress. Shackles hung from the wall. Lavinia gasped, covering her mouth. This is where they kept him. Alaric couldn't speak. His heart pounded in his chest like it was trying to escape. One drawing stood out, a crude but recognizable face. A woman with silver hair and piercing eyes. It's Euphemia Wren, Elias said, voice barely a whisper. He remembered her. Beneath the drawing were words scratched in with something sharp. She said I was dangerous. But I only saw the truth. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, and just before it cut out completely, Alaric saw something in the far corner of the room. A small handprint, fresh, still damp. The flashlight died completely, plunging the small chamber into complete blackness. For a long moment, no one moved. Alaric's hand trembled as he reached for his phone, fumbling to activate the flashlight. When the light finally returned, it flickered weakly, but enough to confirm what he feared. The small handprint on the wall was fresh, still glistening. Not paint, not ink, blood. Lavinia backed away, whispering a prayer under her breath. Elias Crow kept his revolver lowered but his eyes wide and alert. He was here, Alaric said quietly, voice hollow. Not just years ago, recently, maybe even now. His gaze darted around the room, as if Thorne might emerge from the darkness at any moment. But what terrified him more was the thought that this room, this cage, was never just a memory. It was a secret the house had been forced to keep. They examined the walls more closely. One corner was covered in scratches, hundreds of tally marks, some deep enough to gouge the wood. In the center of them, a phrase was etched in jagged lines. He left me here. Alaric stared at the words. The silence pressed in on him. He thinks I abandoned him. The guilt hit like a blow to the chest. But I was just a kid. They sent me away the day after he disappeared. I never had a choice. Lavinia turned toward him, her voice soft but steady. They made you forget. They wanted you to, just like they wanted all of us to forget. But Thorne remembered. He always remembered. That's what made him dangerous to them. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small folded note, the same one found tucked inside the second portrait. This wasn't written by an adult. The pen strokes, the phrasing. This was written by Thorne. Recently, Elias stepped closer to the far wall and tapped it. Hollow. There's another passage behind this panel, he said. He may have used it to move through the estate without being seen. If he's still here, he's hiding in the only place he's ever known. Alaric pressed his hand to the wall. Then we find him, he said. Tonight. But before anyone could react, a sound echoed from the hallway above. The slow, rhythmic creaking of an old rocking chair. They hadn't entered the attic. No one had. And yet, the sound was unmistakable. Alaric turned toward the doorway, the flashlight trembling in his grip. That was our mother's chair, he whispered. The creaking stopped. Then 3 slow knocks. Not at the front door, but directly above them. The attic door creaked as it opened, the stale air pouring down like breath held for decades. Alaric led the way, flashlight trembling in his hand. Each step up the narrow staircase felt heavier than the last, as if memory itself resisted the climb. Lavinia followed silently, and Elias brought up the rear, weapon drawn but lowered. The sound of the rocking chair had stopped the moment they reached the landing, replaced by an eerie stillness that hummed through the beams of the old house. The attic was filled with dust-covered trunks, broken furniture, and cobwebs that hung like curtains. In the center of the room, illuminated by a single beam of moonlight cutting through a cracked window, sat the chair. It was still gently rocking. No one was touching it. No wind blew, but it moved back and forth, steady, like it had never stopped. Then Alaric saw it. A figure standing in the shadows near the far wall. Small, still, a child's silhouette. Thorne, he whispered, stepping forward. The figure didn't move, but the air around it changed, grew heavier, tighter. He moved closer, slowly, until the flashlight beam caught the boy's face. It was him, older than he should be, yet still a child in every way that mattered. Pale, eyes hollow but alert, silent. He stared at Alaric like he was both stranger and brother, past and present colliding in one fragile frame. His clothes were torn, his hands stained red. But it wasn't rage on his face. It was disappointment and pain. "You left me," Thorne said. His voice was quiet, dry like paper. "They said you would come back, but you didn't." Alaric dropped to his knees, breath caught in his throat. "They lied to me," he said. "I was sent away. They said you died. I didn't know, Thorne. I didn't know." Thorne's eyes flicked to the corner of the room. Alaric turned. There, half covered by a tarp, was a figure slumped in a rocking chair. A woman's frame, her hair silver, her face fragile and preserved in death. "Isolde," Lavinia whispered. "Your mother." Alaric approached slowly. In her lap rested an old photograph, 2 boys and a dog, taken on the orphanage lawn. Isolde's hands were wrapped tightly around it. Her expression was peaceful, and in that moment the pieces began to fit. She hadn't just lost Thorne. She had hidden him, protected him the only way she knew how. A whisper cut through the silence. "She told me the world wasn't ready." Thorne stood still, his face unreadable. Then, behind them, the attic door slammed shut. The attic was silent after the door slammed shut. Dust danced in the moonlight, suspended in air too heavy with memory. Alaric didn't move. He remained on his knees before Thorne, searching the boy's eyes for some fragment of trust, of recognition, of forgiveness. But Thorne remained still, his face pale and unreadable, like the child he once was had grown up in the shadows. "I was afraid," Alaric whispered. "Afraid they were right, that you were gone, that I had let you disappear." He looked down at the floorboards beneath them. "But you survived. You found a way. You waited, and I didn't come." Thorne finally stepped forward, slow, uncertain. His voice was barely a breath. "I heard your name sometimes, in the walls. I thought you were dead too. I thought no one remembered me." His eyes glistened. "But Mother did. She stayed, even when her mind broke." He turned toward the rocking chair where Isolde's body sat, the photo still resting in her hands. "She told me not to make noise, not to leave, that they would take me again." Lavinia stepped beside them, tears in her eyes. "They used you, Thorne. What they did at Rosehill. It wasn't your fault. You weren't broken. You were different. That scared them." She placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "But you're not alone anymore." Elias moved to the attic door and gave it a hard push. Creaked open slowly, no resistance, as if the house had simply needed the truth to be spoken aloud. Alaric rose and reached out his hand. "You don't have to hide now. You don't have to be afraid." For a long moment, Thorne stared at it. Then, slowly, his fingers curled around Alaric's. A touch that was real, solid, human. They descended the stairs together, brothers walking side by side for the first time in decades. The house, once heavy with secrets, now felt lighter, as if its walls had finally exhaled. In the hallway, the portraits remained. But now, in the second painting, where Thorne once stared alone, Oberon had been joined by a second figure. Alaric, hand on his brother's shoulder, smiling softly. Lavinia turned to Elias. "What will happen to Rosehill?" He sighed. "It'll be exposed. The Institute, the Reverend's records. It all ends now." He looked at Thorne. "But his story, the truth, it'll be his to tell. Or not. If he wants peace, he gets it." Outside, the fog had lifted. Dawn was breaking, light spilling over the hills in golden silence. Thorne paused at the doorway, looking back once more at the house that had both imprisoned and protected him. Then he stepped forward, into the light, his brother beside him. And for the first time in years, the boy who had been forgotten was finally free.